Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. Today we're going to do another episode of our series Ultimate Guide to Age of Empires 2 Civilizations, and in this video we're going to be covering the Burmese civilization, one of my favorite underrated civilizations in the game right now. They have a lot of really fun options to play with, and I'm going to go ahead and break down the Civ for you today and show you its strengths and weaknesses, as well as how to play it in all the different stages of the game, and kind of just giving you a nice overview for the civilization so you guys know how to play against the Civ and you can play with the Civ to the highest effective degree. Let's hop right in and check it out. Alright guys, so the Burmese, just to give you guys a quick introduction to the Civ, it's basically a civilization that's based around monks, elephants, and cavalry for the most part, but also has a lot of strong infantry. So I would describe it as like a monk, infantry, and cavalry with some elephant tech civilization. It does have some options in terms of range units that it could go for, but it definitely does have a little bit of weaknesses there that we'll cover throughout the video. Overall, I think it's a nice and fun civilization that can play a bunch of different playstyles, and definitely something to pick up if you're looking to play a nice aggressive early game Civ, but also have a decent late game. So it has a lot of flexibility, and I think that's one of the things I like the most about it. Alright, so just to understand a little bit more from the Civ, let's take a look at the tech tree just to know what we're working with exactly, and then we'll go from there. So the Burmese are classified as a monk and elephant civilization, and their bonuses are as follows. The lumber camp technologies are free. Now this is a massive economy bonus, and that helps a lot throughout all stages of the game, giving you a ton of saved resources, and also develops your wood economy quicker than other civilizations. So it's a great economy bonus. The next bonus is infantry get +1 attack per age, which starts in the feudal age. This helps with their men-at-arm rush early on, but it also helps with their halberdier and champion in late game, so it's another bonus that helps you a little bit early and helps you a little bit later. And then next up we have battle elephants that get +1 and +1 armor, so +1 melee and +1 pierce armor. This is a really good bonus for elephants. However, I will say elephants are a little bit more of a situational unit, so this bonus won't be used every single game with Burmese, but it's definitely a nice option to look for, especially if you're up against a lot of archers, because these elephants are extremely tanky. And then finally, the last bonus here is that monetary technologies cost -50%. Incredibly strong bonus when it comes to monk rushing. I can't stress it enough. You get redemption at a really nice discount, you get sanctity for only 60 gold, and you get a lot of the other technologies for way cheaper than you'd normally be able to get them, so it makes them a lot more affordable, which I think is really nice on certain maps and situations. The unique unit is the Arambai, which is a ranged cavalry, and we'll talk about him a little bit more later. Unique text is Hera, which gives battle elephants another +1 armor, so +1 melee, +1 pierce armor, which gives a +2 armor final in Imperial, or even in Castle Age you can get this, so you can get an extra +2 on your elephants potentially, which is absolutely bonkers. So as you can see, going full elephants with Burmese is definitely a viable strategy, and is only really countered by like monks and halberdier. Arbalest or heavy cav archers, they're not going to be doing a whole lot of damage to these elephants. And then their second unique tech is Manipur cavalry, which gives cavalry +5 attack versus archers. This is quite nice because the skirmishers are a little bit weak, as you'll see soon, so having a nice cavalry answer to archers is definitely the way to go in the late game. And then their team bonus, which I think is a pretty solid one, it makes the relics visible on the map at the start of the game, which is really nice, especially when you're paired with like a Lithuanian ally that can pick up the relics early on and knows where all of them are. And it's also very good for 1v1 because, as we know, relics are extremely important to secure that late game, so quite a nice team bonus that also helps out in 1v1s quite a bit. Alright, now that we saw the bonuses, let's take a look at the tech tree here and see what kind of options we can go for throughout the game. So starting off their archer range, guys, there's not a lot of options here, but they do get crossbow, that's not too bad, elite skirmisher, no thumb ring, and they do get heavy cav archer with Parthian tactics. But the big miss for the archer range is Arbalest, hand cannoneer, and both archer armors in the blacksmith. So their archer range is quite weak, only really useful in the early game. Their barracks is extremely strong though. They get fully upgraded champions and halberdier, also the extra attack from the bonuses, so very strong barracks. Stable is also quite strong, fully upgraded hussar with Manipur cavalry, same thing with cavalier, and the elite battle elephant with all the bonuses you get on that guy. So quite some strong options, only missing like paladin and the regional unique units, which don't really matter too much for this civilization. And then for their siege, listen, it's not the best option in terms of siege. We do get heavy scorpion, bombard cannon, which is quite nice. Missing siege ram and siege onager definitely hurts your siege late game, but you have enough siege to do in most cases, in most scenarios. Their blacksmith is fully teched out, except like I said, they're missing 2 armor upgrades, so leather archer armor and ring archer armor. This makes their skirms incredibly weak against range units in late game, so I would say that your skirmishers don't really counter Arbalest and heavy cav archer in Imperial Age. They just get shredded way too fast. I'm not saying never make them, I'm just saying don't expect them to perform that well, because although you have bracer, you're missing a lot of armor and they get shredded extremely quickly. So definitely the biggest weak point in the civilization, and it's what makes them struggle so much against archer civilizations on 1v1 Arabia, for example. So definitely be aware if you want to pick up Burmese, make sure you're getting some other options to cover your archer weakness, because in most cases it's going to be very difficult to make scrims work. Also, if you're playing against Burmese, make sure that you're punishing the fact that they don't get the armor upgrades as well. The dock is pretty whatever. They do get galleon but no shipwrights and no fast fire ship. Going on to the university, they get siege engineer, which is nice, and they don't get bomber tower, but they do get keeps, which is fine. Moving over to the Arambai now, the unique unit, it costs 75 wood and 60 gold. Now the Arambai is not bad. I would say it's like the cav archer replacement for the civilization, and think of it as like the middle between a scorpion and a conquistador. I know it's very weird to mix those two units together, but basically if you have a big ball of Arambai, they have very bad accuracy, but they have high damage. So even the shots that miss their intended target, you can easily hit other targets nearby and do half damage. So if you shoot with like 20 Arambai, you will hit multiple units. It's not just single target and hits only one unit. So keep that in mind, that the more Arambai you have, the more splash damage you do. And it's not exactly splash damage, it's a result of the projectiles missing. Keep in mind though that you do have terrible accuracy, so at long distance, it's not a very strong unit. It is affected by ballistics, so definitely pick that up, but no thumb ring access for the civilization, of course. All right, moving on to their monastery, they have full techs except heresy. And remember, all of these technologies are half price, so you get a lot of nice discounts here. Highly recommend you make use of the monastery when playing the civilization, either offensively or defensively. It's a really strong option. And of course, for economy upgrades, they have all of them available in late game except stone shaft mining, which is not too important. So solid economy as the game goes on. Alright, now that we've seen extensively what Burmese are good at and what kind of technologies they have available, let's think about their strengths and weaknesses to really understand how to play the civilization. I already mentioned how not having archer armor makes their skirmishers extremely weak, and I would say that my whole game plan as Burmese revolves around the fact that I can't really rely on skirmishers that effectively. And so what I would say their strength is putting the pressure nice and early with a men-at-arm rush or a scout rush, or even playing just archers with them, because remember, you are getting that free wood upgrade, which is saving you 150 resources and getting you faster collection rates right off the bat in feudal age for your wood. So going for early rushes is extremely easy with them, and your economy will be very smooth behind it. So combining the fact that you get a free wood upgrade with the +1 attack on infantry makes your men-at-arm rush extremely strong with Burmese. Highly recommend you go for that in most cases, but like I said, going for a scout opening is totally fine as well, and the same goes with archer opening as well. The only thing I would recommend is try not to play too much into archers, because the longer the game goes, the more ineffective Burmese archers become. But if it's just an early game thing, it's totally fine. Even up to mid castle age with crossbows, it's not the worst thing in the world. So transitioning from feudal age now onto castle age, my best advice for castle age is to try to make a switch towards cavalry in some way. Infantry is still not the strongest in castle age, although in some situations like against eagle civilizations or pike siege push into cavalry civilizations, infantry will have its uses. But in most cases, you want to play with cavalry because you need something to counter big balls of crossbows and some siege. So if you go for cavalry and you have whatever mix of units from feudal age left over, you have a pretty good time in castle age for the most part. Remember, cavalry goes very well with monks as well. So if I start playing cavalry with Burmese, I can easily mix in monks and have access to those 50% discounted technologies. So combining knights and monks in castle age makes for a very powerful composition, and you can either push very aggressively or just defend with that and work your way up to imperial age. I will say though, before we get to imperial age, there is a window in late castle age where full elephant spam can be very effective. Remember, you are getting that extra armor for free and another opportunity to get extra armor using Howdah, the castle age technology. So a late castle age elephant push can be extremely strong to kill your opponent before he's able to get to imperial age. Always look for this window when playing as the Burmese. I will warn you though, the biggest weakness to this all-in elephant rush is if your opponent is on pikes or if he's on heavy monks, your elephants will get countered, and even if they have extra armor, it's probably still not going to be cost effective, and you're not going to be able to end the game right then and there. So keep that in mind when or before committing to too many elephants. But if your opponent is going like only archers, just make a lot of elephants. Don't go imperial age, invest all your resources on elephants and some siege, and I'm sure you can end a lot of your games in castle age. It's actually a very strong strategy if your opponent isn't expecting it. Moving on to imperial age though, Burmese really start to be quite flexible in imperial age, but it's not with your common units like arbalest or heavy cav archer. Although you do have heavy cav archer, I recommend you stay away from it because you don't have a lot of technologies for it, and I'd recommend you play with something like infantry mix with some siege and monks. And then for your cavalry, I'd recommend going for hussar just to save a little bit of gold. And so you're looking at like halberdier champion with some siege mix like bombard cannons, and then Hussar and monks as your mobility and some extra spice to your composition with the monk. It ends up being a very strong composition, and it's a very unorthodox one. So a lot of players would have a ton of difficulty dealing with it. Keep in mind, you're not really getting counted by too much in late game, because even if your opponent is on like heavy cav archer or something like that in late game, you have some decent options to deal with it, like going for the weak skirmishers and defending them with halberdier so that they can't get overrun by hussars. It's not a bad option when you don't have a lot of gold. And also a fully upgraded hussar with the Manipur cavalry technology, getting extra damage to archers, is going to be a great tool at dealing with heavy cav archer masses as well as arbalest masses. So it's probably your best friend versus those big balls of archers in late game. Alright, so we've covered the strengths and how you want to play Burmese, but their biggest weakness we were yet to address in big detail, and that's pretty much archer civs at all stages of the game, maybe except in late game where you do have that technology Manipur cavalry, but before that archers are extremely dangerous. And I will say there's not really a magic solution with Burmese, but what I will tell you is that if you play strategically, you can easily get the castle age and go for some siege right off the bat to prevent your opponent from doing too much damage with his initial massive crossbows. Once you keep his initial massive crossbows at bay, you can easily tech into cavalry and control the map with your mobility and just use siege and monk to defend versus archers and whatever kind of cavalry he uses to snipe your siege, because the monks will protect it. The last big danger is that early imp window when the opponent can have a big ball of arbalest, and I would say don't be afraid to tech into onagers with +1 range via siege engineers to stop your opponent from destroying you with arbalest, and naturally they will mix in bombard cannons, and what you can do against that is just try to get into Manipur cavalry either with cavalier or with hussar, and then just run at the bombard cannon and the archers. He's gonna have to kite back because you're doing a lot of damage to him, and then you can easily snipe his bombard cannons using your cavalry units. And you also have the option to go for 12 range monks in Imperial Age to kind of convert the bombard cannons as well. So you do have a few ways to dealing with arbalest bombard cannon as well, and although it's not the orthodox skirmisher approach, I would say it's just as effective if you get the hang of it. There are some other weaknesses to Burmese though, and I would say that one of their big ones is the fact that they don't really have a great DPS unit in the backline, except maybe the Arambai, but even that is a little bit dubious when it comes to consistent DPS due to its low accuracy. So one thing you might be lacking is just that one really strong DPS unit in the backline. There's no way to go around that. You don't really have a good option. So if you want a very strong DPS unit in the back to kind of carry the fights consistently, you're not going to find that with Burmese. It's more about their melee units, and their backline is mixed with siege and monk, like I said earlier. So something a little bit more utility rather than consistent DPS. So it's just the way the civilization is, but it's definitely worth mentioning as a weakness. Overall, I'd say their biggest power spike is going to be the early feudal age, because you're getting the double bit axe for free, and also early castle age because you're getting bonesaw for free. I see those as the two biggest power spikes for Burmese, although I will say that especially in castle age, it is combined with their biggest weakness, which is dealing with those initial crossbows, because skirmishers are really not the best. But feel free to make use of skirmishers if you feel like you need to. It's not the worst unit in the game and will do okay in early castle age at least. But I would say, generally speaking, with power spikes, early castle and early feudal is the best for Burmese, but they get pretty decent as the game goes on, so there's nothing really wrong with them. But that's really where you're going to shine with Burmese the most, in my opinion. As far as matchups go, I genuinely think that Burmese is a great counter to a lot of cavalry civilization. A mix of monks, strong halberdier, and your own cavalry is fantastic at dealing with pretty much every single cavalry civilization in the game. You also have really smooth economy with Burmese, so you're not really falling behind against these cavalry civilizations in general. So I highly recommend Burmese as a cavalry civ counter. But of course, the matchups they struggle with are going to be the strong archer civs. Listen, no matter how much I tell you guys how to stop archers at different stages of the game, it is their biggest weakness at the end of the day. So I wouldn't recommend Burmese into like Ethiopians or Britons. It's going to be an incredibly hard matchup. Any strong archer civ will have a good time versus Burmese, so keep that in mind when trying to pick them up. Alright, I'm going to add another segment to this video, and that's the maps that they should be playing. I think Burmese are great on land maps in general. More or less closed land maps is where you're going to have the most success though, like Arena for example, or some other land maps that are a little bit more slow paced, because monks tend to become a lot better on these kind of maps, and Burmese have fantastic monks. But they're also not bad on open land maps like Arabia or Land Madness, because they get a lot of technologies from the blacksmith. They have very flexible compositions, and I think you have generally a good time playing aggressively early feudal age and taking a lot of advantage from there. So even on open maps, they play really well, and in closed maps is where they probably shine the most though. Alright, so in conclusion, I would say Burmese is a civilization that doesn't really play very standard. It has a lot of options that are strong, but are very unique, like elephants and infantry. And I think if you're looking for a civilization that does extremely well with a big mix in terms of composition, a bunch of different units that kind of mesh together very well, Burmese is your pick, and it's something that you will have a lot of success with if you master it, but it might be hard to kind of get into the swing of things at first. I highly recommend you play a bunch of games with Burmese before deciding whether you like the Civ or not, because it has a lot of options that, like I said, aren't going to be shared with other civilizations. It's quite unique in a lot of its strengths, and definitely play around with those elephant rushes, guys. They're really strong and really fun. That's going to do it with this video, guys. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to drop a like, comment, and even subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.